Welcome to Beyond the Walls podcast. I'm your host, Kylie, and I am so excited to be able to have this conversation with you to help teach you tools, ideas, support on how to go beyond your walls too. Are you tired of feeling stuck and trapped and like a victim in your own life? Maybe you need to find a new way to look at it. Look at your situation from a different angle. Maybe we need to learn and take a look to see how we can re-choose or recreate a life that is going to bring you joy and purpose and feel free and exciting. So let's get started on today's message. So today I want to get into a topic that has been close to my heart lately. I am a mom to a 15-year-old girl, and so I am deep in the middle of teenagehood and just trying to figure out that dynamic, growing as a mom to a teenager, helping her to become her own independent self and wrestling, and it's hard. So if you already had a teenager, you know what I'm talking about. If you're in the middle of that stage, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not there yet, apply this as you will. And this is not really like a teen conversation per se, but really just using this as an example, as a sounding board, as a example of what it can look like in regards to how we relate to other people. What am I talking about today? We're talking about oversharing. So I don't know about you, where you're kind of on that spectrum. I feel like we can tend to be on one extreme or the other. For me as a kid, I was probably on the opposite extreme of undersharing. I didn't want to say anything. I was really private, especially when it came to like deep emotional things. But I'm an extrovert, right? So I love to be with people. I love to have conversations. I love to ask questions, like things that has just been like a part of my training to bring me to where I am today, right? Like I love being a coach. I love having conversations with people. I love coming alongside of them and being like in the trenches. And so a lot of that makes complete sense, right? For me to do that with you, but for me to share vulnerably is a completely different thing that has really been, I think, part of the maturing process and the journey that I've been on through the years. And so it is always kind of a conversation. And are we waiting to build trust with somebody before we feel like we can share? Is it the type of thing that we need to really feel really secure? Or are you just way too TMI? Are you telling all your business to everybody, no matter who they are, people that don't need to know, that have no business knowing, that you're never going to see it again, to the right people? And so that's kind of really what I want to talk about today is how do you know if it's a good kind of sharing or not? Where do you need to grow? Which part of that end of this spectrum are you really wrestling with? And can we bring it somewhere towards the middle, right? If you're an oversharer, maybe there needs to be some more protection. If you're an undersharer, how can you face those fears and really figure out what those walls are that are in your way? So what made me even start thinking about this topic is really just having a front row seat, right, to this generation in front of us, for these teenagers, which I feel for them, it's hard. I feel like every era feels this way. And I think that's just part of life, right? Like where every generation thinks that they've had it the hardest and it's the worst, and it's just different than everybody else's generation. But if I'm comparing my childhood, my teen years with my daughter's teen years, there's a lot that's the same, but there's a lot that's very different. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So something that I have been really surprised and shocked at is the level, the amount of oversharing these kids do. On one hand, it's a great blessing. If you've listened to some of my previous, even recent episodes where I've talked about just repairing relationships with your parents and things that I've gone through to really be open, right? Like I've shared in the one episode that I did with my mom where I count it as a great blessing. Like, me and my mom didn't really have knowledge, the awareness, the platform to even know how to talk about things on a deeper level. Like, we didn't really go deep into all of the things. And I felt like I've been very intentional as a mom to figure out this nurturing relationship where I want to create this safe space for my daughter to share, like, the deep, dark secrets or the challenging things, like the hard things that are really hard and scary. But at the same time, like, I'm not prepared as a mom to know how to handle it, right? But so in that kind of vein, like, there's so much that I have intentionally gone after. I think there is also then in society, I think we're also really wanting that. We're wanting this transparency, this openness to not hide the family secrets, to not hide the challenges or the abuse. We just got through, wasn't that long ago, the Me Too movement, and those are all good things. Have we gone to the other extreme? And is there a challenge about it? So my daughter, probably about a year and a half ago, started working at a fast food restaurant near us. And she would come home and share things that her coworkers, her peer coworkers, were sharing with her. They're still teenagers. Granted, they were just a few years older than her, but the things that are just talked about with no shame, with no filter, with no hesitancy, like no emotion, even, right? Like, deep stuff like abuse, rape, drugs, divorce, like, just all the skeletons in the closet are out. Now, it's not terrible, but is it healthy? Like, what is that other teen wanting from another teen sharing this information? What is the outcome going to be of all of this openness? And so, like I said, right, there's, on one hand, it's amazing that we can have transparency and have honesty. But on the other hand, if there's too much, is there too much transparency? Can there be too much honesty? I think of, when we were having these conversations, it feels like truth bombs or trauma dumping, right? Like, it's just so heavy. And so I think in those conversations, like I've been trying to have with my daughter, where you're like, okay, we don't want to then shame these other kids. We don't want to shut it down. Like, we want to be able to take it seriously. But then also then how to come alongside my daughter that's like, man, like, teen to teen, like, that's too much information for you. Like, you're not responsible for these other people in your life, like the trauma that you're hearing other people are going through. You are not responsible for healing. You're not responsible for repairing or fixing or comforting. Like, how do you show up in a way that you can be comforting? You can offer some comfort, some, like, I hear you and I see you, I'm sorry, some empathy, some compassion. But at the same time, how much is too much? And are we sharing with the right people? And I think, although it is a blessing, right? I think we know that social media and the technology that we have, the quick connections that we can have with people across the world, like real time emergencies being updated and given to us. On one hand, it's a great blessing because we can have these conversations with people. We can know we're not alone. We can get help. Like, if I've been there, see what I've done. How can you get out of these trenches? Do what I did. But on the other hand, it's so much information that it's also just in this void. It's in this mass of overload that's like, it doesn't mean anything. It's falling on empty ears. It's falling out into the vast nothingness. And it's so easy then to either we minimize the severity of what we're going through because it's just normal then. Like, everybody, this is just normal and this is how you do it. And you go through these hard things and nothing changes, nothing happens. No one's there to do anything about it. It just becomes white noise. And I think that's what is so challenging. That's like, man, there's something valuable about guarding our hearts and guarding other people's hearts and not just sharing everything with everyone doesn't make us feel any more connected. It's kind of like, I think we can all feel that way when we're dealing with social media or we're representing ourselves or we're sharing our lives. It really is a snippet, like we can only really know somebody so much in this digital age, in this digital world. And we put stuff out there that's so deep and so raw and so personal. Think we know people more than we do, or we feel more seen and heard than we actually are. But there's something that's just not complete. It's not completely satisfying in that. And I think why it's so important that we still do maintain these personal relationships, but also that we're having these relationships with each other that are actually helpful, that are actually healing, that are going to actually bring good and not just bring more harm, or to make us feel non-existent or invisible or not important. And then we take those, when people don't respond in a way that's helpful to us, we start making these walls and these judgments that's like, see, it doesn't matter. We're just white noise to people. One of the things that I've shared with my daughter, and I have it in another episode, I believe it's episode 7, like one that's early on. And I share a lot about some sexual abuse that I went through when I was a teenager. And that was something that I was sharing with my daughter that was like, I can look back now on myself and think, man, there were a few people that I told about what was going on. Now, I wasn't sharing it from a place where I felt like something terrible and abusive was happening to me, because that's not how I felt in the moment. And so, but I told people what was going on, but I told my peers. I told close friends. And I think on the one hand, I'm super grateful. They weren't mean or ugly to me. They didn't say horrible things about me back to my face. They weren't rude about it, but they also they didn't know what to do about it. And at this age in my life, looking back, I'm like, of course they didn't know. I didn't know what to do with it. Why would they have known what to do with it? And I think a lot of times, I want you to think about in your childhood, in your teen years, or when you have shared certain things, there's so much of our fear that's like, are they going to believe me? What are they going to do about it? And I want us to not miscount being able to really put ourselves in other people's shoes in those moments and think, what did we expect them to have done differently? And I'm not talking about like if you told a parent and they called you a liar, like that's a different situation, and that they should have done something and we should believe each other and all of those things. Okay. So we're not talking about those kinds of like unhealthy, ignoring, minimizing situations. We're talking about being able to really understand, like if you told unhealthy people information or immature, like were they as mature as they could in that moment, but they responded in an age appropriate way, right? And that's how I look back on those situations where my peers at that time, I feel like at this point in my life, they responded in a completely age appropriate way. Right now that I have a teenager, I'm looking at my daughter when she hears these other stories, or she hears peers that are tempted to commit suicide, or they're struggling with all of these things. Yeah, there's an aspect of like, who are the grown-ups in their world that need to know so they can get the help that they need? But knowing that there's nothing that my daughter can do to heal those wounds that other people are experiencing by other people in their world. So I think that that's what we can do, is helping us to all have this appropriate level of really owning who we're talking to and knowing our audience. And I feel for the kids these days, but I think we as 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, however old you are, we're tempted to kind of feel that same way. And it's almost like it's easier, isn't it, to just put it out on social media, out into the void, out to these masses, and not to somebody actually that can help us. It can alleviate some of our loneliness or feeling like we're carrying it all by ourselves to just announce it to the masses. But it also is it sort of a coping mechanism to not really actually tell somebody that can actually help us. You know what I'm saying? We can share in a way that actually doesn't promote or actually help us to heal. But we can wear this badge of honor that's like, but I was open, I shared, I've been talking, I've been telling people. And there's a victimhood in it depending on who we're sharing it with. And I think I wanna talk about that today. If you are somebody who is tempted to just truth bomb other people or to trauma dump or this, it's almost like this toxic vulnerability that's like, I'm so honest, I'm so open, but is it productive? Like, is it actually bringing you the fruit that is going to help you heal, that's going to help you forgive, that's going to help you get the support that you need? Is it going to help you grow? And also being able to consider, like, what's the impact on the other people that we're sharing it with? What is the weight that we're leaving in other people's hands? Are they mature enough? Are they the ones to share it too? So I want you to think about just yourself. How do you approach this topic of sharing? And just kind of start to get curious this week as you're going about your day, as you're thinking about your relationships, the ones you already have good relationships with, or the ones you're trying to build with, or the ones you need to repair. Or have you let anybody in at all? Do you need to kind of start to have these conversations with people to really be open? What's real, honest, and open, and true, and vulnerable? How can you do it in a way that is loving to you and loving to the other people? One of the things that I think about in, like, the example with my daughter's coworker, I think there's so many layers about it. And if you've been around for a minute, you've heard me talk about the importance and the value of naming your upsets. Okay. Upsets are multi-layered. So let's just take the conversation that I had with my daughter, right? There's so many things to be upset about for her and for this other coworker that she's getting all this information from, right? There's, on one hand, I'm hearing this heartbreaking information, and you're just heartbroken for this other young girl. What has she been through? Like, the trauma, just the fact that she's been in all of these traumatic situations and have had these terrible things, such a rough, challenging time that she's going through. Like, that's worthy of just being upset about. Then there's this, like, but what is the help that they're getting? What help do they need? What role am I going to play in this situation? What should I do to help? And there's things where you think about, like, why is she sharing in this way? Like, what's going on in her world, in her mind? What's the outcome she's wanting for the situation? Like, does she want my teen daughter to do something about it? Is she even sharing like she wants help? It doesn't really sound like, from the way it gets back to me, like, she doesn't need help. She doesn't want help. She's just, here's me. This is me, as if it's her identity, if it represents an accurate picture of who she is. It's easy to think too of, like, what is it that she's reacting to of how other people have responded? Has she started to make these walls in her life that's like, it doesn't matter what I share? Sometimes we share in those ways for attention, for, like, please, somebody hear me and help me. Or it's out of a hardened heart that's like, I don't need help and I don't care, and we're callous to it. It's not a big deal. Do you see how each of those are a completely different thing? They're overlapping. They are intertwined, but they cause different needs for different responses. We're going to act differently. They have different answers to those problems. And then you think for my daughter, they would represent people that are hearing this information. Again, it's just the pure trauma of hearing and feeling that weight of somebody else's hardships and things that they're going through. You just feel for that kind of pain. Then there's the pressure and the responsibility to need to fix it, to solve it, to alleviate it for that other person. How can we fix and take away that pain? Then there's just the desire and the need to know how to say it in a way that's loving, that lets them know, like, I still love you. I'm here for you. Like, I want to help you in any way that I can, right? Then there's this pressure and this fear that's like, okay, I don't want my daughter to then normalize this and just say, oh, this just is how life is. This is normal. Either expect it, go after it, give into it, be tempted by it, or to even minimize or make it mean things. There's judgments that we're constantly making in these situations that where we make these decisions about what it means about me and what it means about you. It's important that we break down these situations in our lives and really think through and own, boy, what is it that I want to do now about it? Who is the person to share? What is the impact on others? Think about, with this situation, if we're all just looking at it in general and we're trying to figure out, like, how do we change? How do we grow? How am I going to become somebody who can share in a healthy, vulnerable way? Because the answer to all of this, I hope that you're not hearing, is don't share, have your guard up, you damaged people, like that. Now all of a sudden you're in this protective mode that's like, let me shut down and let me shut others out. Just so when I don't bother them, I don't want to be too much for others and I'm too much for myself. And that's not the answer. The answer is somewhere in the middle. That's like, how are we doing it? Are we doing it in a healthy way right now? Are the people around us doing it in a healthy way? How do I want to move forward? And so I think the tool I want to leave you with today is the importance of starting first by recognizing your why. Why are you sharing or not sharing? Why are you sharing this particular thing in this particular way with this particular person? What type of people do you share things with? What kind of people do you not share things with? How and when, like the timing of it, right? Like, do you drop a truth bomb on the way out the door after you just spent a whole weekend with them? Like if you're visiting family or doing something, right? Or is it right at the end of a phone call where they aren't available to keep talking, they're busy, leave it in a voicemail? Or do you share it in a way that's like, okay, we can actually have a real conversation about this? Like there's time, there's availability on your part and their part to actually have a real conversation to resolve it. It's important to think about, what is it that you're wanting from the other person by sharing this information? Being really clear with yourself that sometimes it's okay. And if you're not expecting them, like not everybody should be fixing it with you. Not everybody is capable of coming alongside you and being in the trenches with you. They might be the person that you do just need to tell because they're going to go get help. If you're having a hard time finding help, then you go tell the person that can go get help for you. It may not be that specific person, but they're going to go get another friend. They're going to bring somebody else in. They're going to be the middle woman for you, right? They're going to be able to say the hard things that you're afraid to say. And that's fantastic, right? Like that is valuable. So just because they can't fix it and you don't want them to fix it, it's just important that you're really clear with yourself about your real intentions in sharing this stuff with other people. I want you to think about, what will the impact be on that other person? Can they handle it? How much can they handle? Are they in a good space to handle it? Sometimes we don't want to make that judgment for other people. Sometimes it's really obvious to know, and I think that's something that I tell my daughter, right? Like if you have real things, like, yes, it's good to have peers and people your age to share the burdens with each other. But no, that age, the awareness, the maturity, the tools, the life that you have at that time, it's too big for you. You need older people. You need more mature people in there with you. And so although it's good to have a peer, you really need help. You need somebody older than a peer. You need somebody outside of that circle. Does that make sense? So it's not like we can't share with those people that can't help us. We can share with people that can just relate and will have compassion on us. But we also need people in our lives that can help us. Who's going to help us see up and see out? Who's going to help lead us to resources that are going to be beyond us, that we really do need somebody to come alongside of us and to really train us, to teach us, to encourage us, to build us up, to make a difference in our lives, to help us to grow and to change. It's also appropriate to consider, like, we can share some parts, but maybe not everything with everybody. Really taking into consideration what the other people can handle. And then I think it's also appropriate to consider and to think about, like, can you handle knowing that these other people know? Is it something that you really do want out there? And being really careful about who you're sharing with. Now, I'll preface that with this thought that I think ultimately, as I've gotten older and as I've matured and tried to figure out how to really share my life in a transparent way, my motivation is really me being honest with me. And part of sharing with other people is helping me be honest with me and letting other people in. Because the biggest lie that we're tempted to believe is that we're alone, we're going to be judged, we're going to be rejected, no one will understand. And I think that that is so far from the truth for the majority of people in our lives. And if those are your immediate circle, then I definitely encourage you to go outside that circle. Go get other people. Go find people in your life that can be mature enough, secure enough, healthy enough to help you in a way that can really come alongside you in those trenches. A lot of people want and can and are able to be that for each of us. And I think when we give them the opportunity first to try to be that, instead of putting up all of these walls and these fences and these obstacles to prove that you're a safe person, that you're trusting, that you're not going to use this against me, you're going to experience that kind of connection that we really want from people so much easier and so much faster. And I think, so coming back to how I originally started that, was that if it's really more about me being open for myself, then it's a lot less about how other people do respond. It really doesn't matter, like, if they're going to use it against me or they're going to use it in an unhealthy way, or they're going to, like, I need to be secure in who I am to be okay with that. It's okay to trial and error. It's okay to learn from those mistakes. It's okay to need to go down this path to figure out, like, oh, maybe now's not a good season for them. And we change. I think that's an important thing too, that there are seasons in our lives where sometimes people can handle it, and then other times, because of whatever it is that they're going through in their own life or the ways that they've grown or they're maturing, they may or may not be anymore. And how can we give them a second chance if they're warranted for it? How can we continue to ask ourselves these kinds of important questions to really know, are we able to handle it, and are they able to handle it? So as you assess yourself this week, I want you to not take action, but just take your own internal action of observing, of thinking through, of getting really clear. And you can use your past. It's a beautiful way to use your past to really understand and think through, like, boy, how do I share? Which part of that spectrum am I on? And which direction do I need to go? Do I need to kind of rein it back in and maybe not just bleed all over everybody? Am I just blowing everybody up with way too much information that they can't handle, that is not appropriate, that is unhelpful to me? Or do I need to start to open up more and let people in and give them the opportunity to show support, to help, to be a great source of comfort and empathy and compassion? Why are you sharing the things that you're sharing? Why are you sharing them in the way that you're sharing them? I think, on the top of my head, I think there's a lot of reasons we share different things at different, and sometimes we overshare to protect ourselves, actually. It kind of just pushes people away. Are you doing shock value? Are you just automatically isolating? Are you wanting people to just reject you and be away? You sharing in such a loud, aggressive way because you just don't even know. You're just so overwhelmed and you're like, anybody help me. Let me just tell everybody and somebody will come alongside me. Are you sharing in a way that actually allows people to come in and be that change that you really want them to be, to come alongside of you and to really help you? Are you pacing yourself? Are you sharing in a way that is actually honest, represents you accurately? And is it the real conversation or just the right? I have a great episode about that as well, about really being able to talk about the actual problem. And I think that's what's so challenging is I think, with the things that these teens are talking about and sharing about, they're such big icebergs. They're just these really loud flashes on the outside, but what's right below the surface? What's really deep down at the core that actually needs the healing, that actually needs the hope, that actually needs the comfort and the guidance? And we can get so distracted by all of these fireworks and the loud circumstantial things that are happening in our lives that they're just become a distraction. It's like almost just becomes like a scapegoat. It's not even the issue anymore, but it becomes such a distraction to us and to other people. And then there's people in our lives that are being that way for us. And I want you to just maybe take a step back and think, can I handle going deeper with them? Can I handle going into this or can I not? And how are we going to set ourselves up to guard our hearts and to guard theirs? And so as you're assessing this week, as you're looking to yourself and thinking through, like, boy, what has my why been? Where do you want to go on the spectrum? Which direction do you need to go towards? And just start to think about little ways that you can tweak it, little ways that you can move in that direction. And maybe it's working, but you just know it's uncomfortable. Then keep going, right? You're looking at it and you're like, okay, it was good at one time, but it no longer serves me anymore. And I need to do it differently. And again, we don't want to just exchange one for the other. If you've been the truth bomber, like, you don't want to just shut down and just cut everybody off and not say a word out of fear for doing it wrong. And vice versa. Someone who's not been saying anything, you can't just like blow the top off and spew on everybody. But what are one or two or three people that you can really pour your heart out? That you really can open up and say the real things about what's really going on below the surface? What do you actually need help with? What are you actually hurting with? What are you actually upset about? And figure out a way that you can really show up honest in a way that is honorable to you and is honorable to other people in your life. I would love to hear from you on what your thoughts are from today's message, of what is helpful to you, what was a helpful nugget. If you have questions, if you're like, I don't know how to apply that, or I don't know how to make those next steps, please contact me. You can leave a message on the podcast details in here. You can email me. You can find me on Instagram. Let's connect. You also want a tool. I have a tool on the website, and I'll leave it in the show notes as well, that if you find yourself just showing up insecure in relationships often, if you're feeling triggered and you're left feeling like, oh my gosh, what were they thinking of me? Let's say you did overshare and now you're just left feeling just so exposed and uncomfortable and don't know where to go. Come get my guide. I have a great tool that will help you kind of ask yourself a few questions to help you get back to a secure space where you can kind of separate out what your meaning, what your value and your sharing looks like when you're not really sure how the other people received you. You're not really sure, boy, did I just ruin that first impression? Did I just cause conflict where I didn't think there was going to be conflict? How can I separate out myself from others' reactions? or their lack of reaction. And I think it'll be able to help you to really lock in to figure out how to be secure in who you are. And I think that that's something that has been really helpful in my journey as I've gone from the undersharer to figuring out how to not overshare, but to share in a way that is honoring to myself and to others. And I think that security really is a real foundational piece to it. When I can be secure in who I am and other people are just icing on the cake, they're not my identity, they're not my salvation, they're not my be all and end all. They're just blessings or hardships. It can be challenging too. When I'm secure and I'm loved all by myself, then I get to have this space. I have this conversation. I have this way of being able to separate out. I am lovable. I am loved. And I can be seen and heard, and it can upset other people. It cannot be something they could have handled in that moment. Like, it leaves room for our imperfections in relationship. So go get your guide today. It is free to you. And I look forward to sharing with you again next week. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that brought you a lot of encouragement and some information to be able to apply to your own life and to start taking down those walls that are in your way. What is that one thing that you want to take on and take with you today? I would love to hear from you and to hear about it. Follow me here on the podcast so that you're alerted and don't miss any upcoming episodes. You can find me on Instagram or even on my website at beyondthewallspodcast.com. If you want more help, I offer one-on-one coaching and would love to connect with you. Until next time, have a great day.